Welcome to Rebel Capitalist Live.
After Action Report.
Featuring ROLLO TOMASSI.
And Jay Waller. Well, what did you think of your very first Rebel Capitalist Live?
It was a good event.
Yeah?
It was a good event. I have been to a lot of events like this, industry events. I built a lot of my career at events where you meet and greet and you learn in between and you do seminar type work and you take those things and you bring them back to your business. But the thing that always stands out to me the most are the connections that you make with people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what the whole thing's about. We were at the Mixer last night and they recruited us, I guess, to give a testimonial about it. And I think that's the first thing out of my mouth was that it's about people coming together and gathering and expressing and not saying debating, but like just talking about ideas. And that's something I think is severely lacking right now, because I think when we have this global access to a worldwide discussion, but we're doing it from our phones all the time, and not coming together in, like, say, a consortium or some sort of aggregate of ideas,
right.
A marketplace of ideas. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. And that was the first thing I talked about. And I wanted to start off with that because a lot of people are going to ask, well, what does this have to do with the red pill? What does this have to do with the manosphere? What does this have to do with intersexual dynamics or, masculine empowerment? And I think a lot of people are, there's a certain, let's say, subsection of the manosphere that thinks that the red pill should be just about masculine empowerment or self-improvement. And I'm not saying that that shouldn't be. It's certainly an aspect of it. And I think that this event is a good place for people who are wanting to sort of build themselves up with respect to money, muscles, and game. Well, here we've got the money aspect in spades.
Yep.
And you are networking with people who are of the like mind and are, a lot of them have a lot of crossover into, certainly my audience and your audience as well.
Right.
And we're meeting a lot of people here who are familiar with my work, certainly familiar with you, and I think that it's a good opportunity for just pretty much anybody. If you're interested in sort of building yourself up as a man, if you're, we talk about all the time how we need to live, build yourself up to the best version of yourself possible. Well, part of that is financial, and then part of that is understanding red pill awareness, of course, and I think there's a lot of crossover between that.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. A lot of the red pill is about making a decision to do things that a lot of people did not do. And Rebel Capitalist, especially this event, talks in great detail about taking the old rules of money and applying new rules and not playing the old game and going your own way. So it's almost been like a red pill for money and how to not only make money, but to preserve your money, keep your money, keep your freedom, and keep your ability to congregate, because revolutions happen when people come together.
Exactly.
And there's nothing that can trump a real life experience when you can look another man in the eye and know that you two align in some way on a mission, and you're no longer alone and you're not by yourself.
Exactly. And
that you don't want to play by the rules of the government or inflation or COVID or getting a fucking shot you don't want to take. And so when you have a powerful man like Ron Paul,
at this event?
Right.
Robert
Kiyosaki, Richard Gammon stand up in a room for the other like-minded men and say they want to stand up or not do a certain thing. That's about as red pill as something can get. You could take women out, put financials in, and it really is kind of a red pill scenario where you said, you know what, you all can stay inside that matrix of paying taxes, being locked up in your homes, being told what to do, or we can come together because we all feel the same way, and together we can stand against something.
Right.
And I think that's what's the most valuable thing about what George did. And he did it professionally. He did it in an orderly way. He put big players here. And honestly, I feel like I owe him a little bit of money because the ticket versus the value.
Yes.
It's It's one of the best events I've ever been to. And you see this all the time. I feel this way about war room events. I feel this way about association events and steel that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, George knocked this shit out the fucking park.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to a bunch of these things, the value that he put out for us, and the speakers that came up, quantitative easing, history of governments and how they went from socialism to communism, and slowly, by a death by 1,000 cuts and little concessions that people make.
Centralization of money, yes.
Yeah.
That was another theme that I listened to this weekend.
And how they want to go to a digital currency and what can be done about it, and the importance of gold and silver and Bitcoin, and talking to Robert about putting, if you make $1 million, you need $5 million in debt to offset the taxes, because I don't want to pay taxes. I'm going to move my money out of the country, get another passport, So all of these things that they're talking about, not only are they educational, but in my opinion, I think wealth is like a three-part system. It's like you make the money, you find a way to preserve and keep the money, particularly from taxes, and then you make the money grow. And a lot of what these guys are talking about is dead on and right in line with that, especially when it comes to Robert talking about taxes, especially when it comes about, hey, if you want to keep your wealth and you don't want them to inflate you to being impoverished, then put your money in a vehicle like gold, silver, Bitcoin, bullets, in Robert's case.
Bullets and Bitcoin,
yeah. Yeah, right? In a vehicle that the bank can't just print out of thin air.
Right.
And in my opinion, that's what this event has been about. That's why I think George nailed it. That's why I think George is a fucking hero. Right. In a lot of ways, his videos are dead fucking on. I learn a lot from watching his videos. And then you get in this atmosphere and you can learn and get this kind of lesson for that amount of money.
Yeah,
It's a deal, man.
George Gammon hit me up, I think it was almost this time last year, maybe it was February or March of last year, and wanted me to come on his show, and I had no idea who he was, and I had a lot of my followers were saying, you need to go on his show, you need to talk to him, he's a red pill guy, and I was like, he's a financial guy, right? And I'm like, well, okay, I'll go and talk to him about the aspects that I think are crossover from what I talk about when I'm getting into intersexual dynamics, and what's the bigger scope, what's the bigger picture in all of that. Because I think a lot of people will say, well, what does this have to do with intersexual dynamics? What does this have to do with how can I get laid? How can I get the girls, kind of thing? And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the red pill is just about pickup artists. It's just about dating coaches. It's just about the red pill, the black pill, MRAs, MGTOW, that is, we have our little sub-tribes throughout the red pill communities of Manosphere. And what I try to express to people who don't know what the quote-unquote red pill is, because it's almost like a changing definition all the time, because people want to take the red pill and turn it into whatever aligns with their pet ideologies. So you had like the old school, like back in 2015, you had the alt-right adopting the term the red pill, and then it sort of turned into something that it was never really intended to be, but it was something that still had that crossover into other areas and other, like, crossing the streams, right? And I think that when people, for example, when people ask me, Rollo, what's the red pill? And I tell them this, I say, there's no elevator pitch for the red pill. You can't just sit there and say, okay, 5 minutes, you go, give a Shark Tank, right? Give me your pitch, right? Because there are so many different aspects of culture, of our personal lives, you can get into evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, sociology, anthropology, economics, politics. So you go from the micro all the way down to why does a woman's ovum select certain sperm from the microscopic level, all the way up to why is Janet Yellen the director of the Fed right now? And so when we go and from that little minute level all the way up to the macro level, that's still the red pill. It's still intersexual dynamics. Men and women are different. How do women govern? How do women allocate funds and resources? And that's why events like this, from a macro level, it's not the microscopic level, which I've talked about quite a bit, but when we're talking about the meta scale of intersexual dynamics, this is definitely representative of that meta scale. And that's what I try to do in my workshop. that I had on Friday, which was on January 7th. And I went for about 2 hours. I was only supposed to go for one, but
Which two
you know
women?
how long. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He'll go.
Yeah.
2 women showed up to that.
Two
event.
women did show up to it. And I tried to make it as pertinent to the theme of rebel capitalist that I could. And what that meant to me is explaining sort of the macro level, or at least having the conversation. People say, well, Rollo doesn't know anything about that. He's not an economics guy. Yeah, but I'm also an intersexual dynamics guy, and I see how it applies to those areas of humanity, really. So it's not just, it's anthropology, it's sociology, it's psychology, it's biology, it's all these ologies, right? But there's different fields or disciplines that I think are all constitute really what's becoming this aggregate of what really the red pill should be. And we need to ask these questions based on what do we know about how men and women are different, what do we know about how economics are different as a result of, say, more and more women coming into the workplace. That's a red pill topic.
Well, absolutely. And I would say that if you look at economics really closely, doesn't it not start in the household?
Absolutely, yes.
And so when
I'm glad you brought that up.
When you go in a conversation about how women are driving spending, or when women are kind of in control of the economy, or if there's more single women out in the marketplace working, or what have you.
Or in colleges, in college enrollment.
Exactly. So whether the household is together, how it used to be, or now that it's starting to seem to be broken a bit, it changes the economy on a micro level. With macro scale.
Exactly. Well, when women are the ones making the majority of purchasing decisions in families and on their own, I brought up during my workshop how was it the rise of the she economy? Morgan Stanley's already making forecasts for 2030 based on the predictions and the forecasts, I guess, of more and more women who are the prime working age women being single at that time. So how does that affect the economy? How is that knowledge, that foreknowledge, affecting our economy now? Not necessarily even in 2030. Again, another intersexual dynamics perspective that has a lot to do with what we're talking here. Now, the best thing you just said is talking about how
Start in the household.
The household, but what is it? Politics is downstream from society, right?
Right.
Politics, economy, or excuse me, society, economy, politics. So it's a downstream from that. Well, what's upstream from that? That's intersexual dynamics. How do men and women come together? Why is it that you have more women in college right now? Have we empowered women, at least in Western societies, to the point where we are governing differently as a result of having more women in Congress, more women in the Senate, where just on the threshold of having Kamala Harris become the first female president? We've got when we're looking at the decisions and the best one I think was talking about student debt. We're looking at $1.7 trillion in student debt that Biden's not going to forgive, although it was a campaign promise. Right. But why is it so popular? Why did people want to vote for him as a result of that? Well, you have to let's look at the gender breakdown of that, which is 2/3 of that debt is held by women. How does that affect the economy?
Well, it doesn't make quite a bit of sense that they used to have 50% of the population as labor force, but if they separate men from women by empowering women, now they have twice the ants on the farm. And if they tell women that the way to get up there and compete with men is via a college degree, which you take out a student loan for, then you've now enslaved women almost in the same way that you could enslave men with child support.
Yes, there's another good one, child support. How is that affecting, how is men's employment or numbers affected by the fact that they've got an alimony payment or they've got a child support payment?
Yes.
And what led up to 86-87% of women getting sole custody in a divorce settlement?
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that I have an expertise in, but here we are at Rebel Capitalists talking about those things, and we're kind of, I think, honestly, we're broadening the scope of the discussion, of the discourse that goes on here. So it's not just about here's real estate and here's the prime interest rate and everything else. It's well, okay, how did we get to that, and how can we make better decisions? How can we leverage this information based on what we know about intersexual dynamics? Men and women are different.
Let's take it down to a micro level. I have lost men over getting a statement in from the state, recognizing that that man has been working for me for a certain amount of time, and they start to garnish his checks and his wages over child support. Well, here's a big thing that stood out to me when I'm sitting there listening to George or one of the speakers talk about how inflation keeps rising prices, but the pay does not go up with it with the rate of inflation. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at that man that's probably got a child support settlement put against him, has left his old job because he can't afford to buy food, come over to me, get found out, and then quit immediately. No issue between me and the man. He will leave or go find a job working for cash in construction. Because because what happens is there's inflation in the market, the price of everything it takes for him to live has gone up. His pay might be the same. I can't afford sometimes to pay all these guys the matching rate because I'll lose. Because I pay taxes on my guys, and I pay them overtime, and I pay them per diem, and I pay them travel time. I write by the book. Whereas other people in construction might pay cash. So for me to win the job, I have to pay a certain rate. And then he gets this thing that comes in over child support, and the next thing you know, between inflation and child support, he's got to quit me and go work somewhere else until he gets found out again. And I don't take any of these men for men that don't want to take care of their children. It just makes it close to fucking impossible if a guy's making $22 an hour slinging steel. You know, or I mean, and I've got guys that make up in the 30s. I've got at least 6 guys that make over 100 grand, and I can tell you right now, most of the guys make money that they would have made if they had a degree, but by the time they inflate the money and the cost of goods goes up, if you have 1 or 2 kids and you have a divorce, it makes it substantially harder to make it.
It's an uphill battle.
It is definitely an uphill battle.
I see that also in sort of our popular discourse, I think, even on channels that I would not necessarily say are quote unquote red pill channels, or certainly not manosphere channels, but if I listen to guys like Andrew Klavan, or I listen to Candace Owens, or I listen to popular, and pick and choose who you want from, like the Daily Wire, like Matt Walsh or something, and they do these shows and these analysis of the state of men or the crisis of masculinity, and we need men to man up, and the marriage rate is at 6.1%, and we can't get the fertility rate is very, very low, and men aren't living up to their responsibility, whatever their old school, old order, traditional responsibilities are supposed to be. And we keep saying, well, the answer, the solution to the crisis of masculinity is men just need to take on more and more and more responsibility. But yet, where we're at as far as once again, politics and society downstream from society. We're at a point right now where men aren't empowered. They don't have the authority to meet the responsibilities that we think is going to be this, solution or this cure for this problem of masculinity. And so when I'm listening to somebody like, say, Matt Walsh, for example, and I don't, not to pick on him because I know Candace Owens does the same thing as well, but that seems like it's the magic button. It sounds right. It sounds like, well, men just need to be men and man up and take more responsibility. And yet you're telling me that you're dealing with guys who are in positions where they want to be responsible, but they have to play, they have to play by a rule set that is that's leveled against them.
Or the
economically speaking.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with most of the time taking care of the kid. Maybe the settlement is some certain percentage of his income, not what it actually costs to raise a child. And so by the time he has that, plus inflation, plus rates staying basically the same, and then gas going through the roof or what have you, or a situation that slows things down like COVID, so we have steel delays, or you heard the guy today talking about lumber and lumber shortages. Lumber going through the roof, like $1,700 a board foot or something of that nature, shutting projects down. So the guys at the mills have to go home. The guys at the lumber yard have to go home. Then what do? Because you still have the child support to pay. And my childhood was really around a lot of child support and custody papers and things that were created by the courts. And my father was the son of a cotton farmer. My grandfather fought in World War II as a tail gunner, came home, farmed cotton in Oxford, Mississippi, built houses. And my dad was not highly educated, didn't go to Ole Miss, went and worked on the farm all day. And when his dad shut it all down towards the end, he went and got a job at McDonald's. Met my mother in Vicksburg, Alabama. She was 19 years old. He was 27. She had me. They divorced twice for cheating. Right?
There's your intersexual dynamic.
You want to talk
There's
about
your intersexual dynamic.
A red pill life, right? And she would have buried him in court, but somebody died and he inherited $10,000 and he spent it all on lawyer fees, fighting in court. But I remember growing up, when we would go see him, he had a little shack. It cost $50 a month. We'd eat pimento cheese for dinner. And this man was working 50, 60 hours a week to eat pimento cheese in a house full of rats in the middle of a cotton field. And when I tell you that men are not as shit as they're made out to be. And they're not as cowardice, and they're not as weak, and they're not as irresponsible as people are making them out to be. But the agenda, in my opinion, is to separate the women from the men, so the women will go into the workplace, pay more taxes, get student loans, buy stupid ass fucking tract home houses, put stupid ass photos of Audrey Hepburn on the fucking wall and think they're a bad bitch, and be very unhappy, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
I also, I wanted to, I guess, interject into this conversation here. I hear like a guy like, say, Tucker Carlson, for example.
Yeah.
He's done a series, it was in the past, I think it was probably last year or the year before, where he was talking about how more and more jobs that used to be traditionally held by men, like construction jobs, industrial jobs, electrician, like that kind of stuff, are increasingly declining right now. Trucking.
Labor's an issue.
Labor is very much an issue.
An issue.
Traditionally, the roles or the careers, the jobs, whatever, that men go into, the employment that they go into, is starting to dry up, right? It's like this. Oh, now we have robot cars, and so now but who does that affect? Disproportionately, it's going to be men. What women go into certain fields, men go into other fields. According to Dr. Steven Pinker, men are interested in things, women are interested in people, and it's reflected in the kinds of things that they're interested in, the kinds of career choices they make, the kinds of majors that they take when they're in school. Men tend to go for STEM fields, women tend to go into the humanities, or they go into communications and things like that. Right. And how does that affect the economy in that sense? But as far as, like, say, people have asked me this before, and I don't think I've ever addressed this on my own show, is they want to say, well, a lot of this has to do with, like, labor. It has a lot to do with, like, how the economy is being manipulated or controlled, so that men are less empowered. That's why we say, like, when we were talking to Robert Kiyosaki, he was like, men are like soy boys now. They're manginas and everything. And that's a generational thing. But is that the result of this sort of cultural shift, or is it because those guys, they don't have fathers in the household anymore as a result of what's been going on for the last 4 generations, or is it because those industrial jobs have dried up?
No, I actually think it's two things. The first thing, in reference to technology, yes, technology is getting rid of labor jobs in a lot of cases. And then the other thing that I think has been glaring to me for a very long time is my generation's, and obviously the younger generation's, perception of labor as a job. It's very hard, in my opinion, for a young man to get excited about going out to work with his hands when Facebook has told you have fucking failed if you're doing that. Facebook and Instagram have told you that if you pick a trade or you pick a blue collar business to go work in, if you're not doing tech or selling Amazon drop shipping from a beach somewhere, you have failed.
Your 4-hour work week.
Yeah, you have failed. If you were, Tim, I like Tim Ferriss a lot. And I want to just circle back to the female thing. I have a majority of women running my construction management. side of the company. Now they're not in the field. I think we out of over 100 guys, we have one woman in the field. Now what we do is very dangerous. It is a very difficult trade physically and mentally. Women do tend to be very good managers. Trump had a female construction management lady. She did very well. They're very organized. They're good for those things. They're less combative. So you're not fighting for supremacy in any way in the office or worried about the guy leaving and starting another company. They want to feel a part of something. That's a very good thing. They need guidance from me, and I don't think that's a man or a woman thing. Robert built his business with a lot of women involved, but the truth of the matter is mostly men were building the buildings and doing the construction and driving the trucks and showing up when it's cold and fighting the elements. So in regards to technology and trucking, yes, I think that's a technology thing. In regards to the men going out in the field and taking pride and working with their hands, I actually think that's an internet era thing, where the young man that used to be proud of being a carpenter and being very good at it, now doesn't. He might as well say he's a barista at Starbucks.
Right.
I think they can't have blue collar work. There's no pride in it. The fact of the matter is, and I just said this when I spoke to my guys at our Christmas party, is the world does not go around without these men.
Oh yeah, yeah. So everything around us, everything was built.
Yes.
You know.
And I predict probably in the next decade, that new hack that's going to be going around the internet, the whispering hack, the new cheat code is like, learn a trade.
Yeah.
You're going to make a shit ton of money.
Become an electrician.
Yeah. Be an electrician. Learn how to erect steel. Be a plumber, bro. Like, fuck that Amazon FBA stuff. I think we'll see that day. I think because either that
we'll get to that point where we'll need that so badly that we'll have to
and that's what's happening. There'll be a demand, a flex, you know, and today it's really hard. You know, I wrote the standards to the apprenticeship program for metal buildings in Louisiana. We got to push through. Me and the lady at the state worked really hard on it. The issue that we run into is guys coming through wanting to do that as a career. And I think the reason that is a thing, and I think the reason that every time I go to a board meeting at the Metal Building Directors Association, every time I go to MetalCon or an event, the talk is always around labor, workforce. How do we find good guys?
Qualified, skilled labor.
Right, and I think at the end of the day, you know, you can joke and say every man wants to feel like James Bond, every man wants to feel cool, every man wants to be, you know, James Dean, you know?
Do you think that some of that has to do with also the sexual marketplace? So now
Absolutely.
We can interject that.
Look, man, you go on there and say, if you go online, let's say you went on a dating app and the girl asked you what you do, and you told her that
I'm a plumber.
yeah, or something like that. It's not a very sexy thing to say, is it? And it's not just on the level of the guy working. Even a business owner, I think a lot of America's talent is going to tech products that might not even be useful. You know what I'm saying?
Or service-based economy as well.
Yeah.
Like doing a service, selling an information product.
Yeah,
as opposed to an actual thing.
Right, right. And so I think that for that reason, it's really hard for construction. And it's hard for guys that want to drive trucks, or guys that would have been farmers, or guys that fabrication,
building things,
right, building things,
making the actual work that gets done, like raw sewage, right? I mean,
the things that make this world go around.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the reason I'm asking that is because I had two things. First of all, I read recently this story about a shortage of teachers right now. Maybe it has something to do with COVID, probably because we're in lockdown, or are we or aren't we? I don't know, but because of the way that education has been shifting. But if you look at the sort of the gender skew of teachers, 77% of your teachers in the United States, anyways, from the time you're in preschool all the way up until your postgraduate, are going to be female. All right, so guys don't want to get into teaching because, first of all, there's no money in it.
There's no money.
You can't support a family on it, and then there's a lot of inherent risks. If I don't toe the ideological line, or if I step out of line with the mostly women staff that I'm going to be working with, then all of those years in college to get my education degree, to learn what I'm going to teach and then how I'm going to teach, all of that's out the window. Why am I going to bother with that low-paying job or that low-paying, low-reward job if I can go and be an accountant, if I can go and do something that's going to be a little bit more sexy or at least make some more money kind of thing? That, I think, is where we have to sort of think about how intersexual dynamics plays into the career choices that men make, which of course then affects the economy. So when that's number one. Number two is this: I had a conversation with a woman this morning, and I was talking about how when a couple gets together and the man and the woman are making the same amount of money, or the guy's making a little bit more, and the woman gets a promotion at work, or she gets a bump in pay or a promotion of some sorts, and now she's making significantly more, at least substantially more money than the guy that she married, who she thought was a great guy, that tends to precipitate divorce. And so there is this intersexual dynamic that goes on between men and women when it comes to the man's frame, first of all, and then second of all, it's this provisioning understanding. So when women are looking for the beta buck side of hypergamy, it's protection, provisioning, and parental investment. And so when there is a fundamental shift in that, who he was before is not who he is now, because now she's got to go and look up to men or take orders from men who are above her station at that in the American workplace. And now she's going to go and be around these guys who are higher status than her husband is, and yet she's going to submit to that guy when she comes back home at the end of a 40-hour work week. That's the kind of thing that I think we have to have a conversation about right now. And I think what gets lost in the weeds, by the way, when we have these conversations about Brittany Renner, right? Or we want to, it's the latest Jack Murphy or whatever it is that's sort of preoccupying us with, he pretends to be an alpha. I can't stand those guys. Great, take that shit and go over here and have your fun with that for a while, because the real conversation is this kind of stuff right here that has to take place. And if it doesn't take place, nothing gets done, and no problems we can't solve a problem if we can't talk about that damn problem. Yep. And that, again, that's why rebel capitalism is very valuable in a red pill sense.
Right. Let me ask you a question about that whole example that you just gave. Mm-hmm. Do you look at the woman there, or do you look at the society that we've allowed to happen as men?
I look at both, actually, because I think that there is an innate natural inclination amongst women to want to be able to. A woman can't look up to a man that is her equal. Right. He has to be above. I mean, women complain about men who are not economically attractive, and data, research shows that that guy has to make as much as her, and then 58% more.
But would you also add to that is probably a non-conscious decision or feeling that individual's having?
Yeah, I think there is that, and also it's nature and nurture.
Yes, and inside the structure of something that we have created as men, we've allowed to happen as men. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to why I think things like rebel capital are so important, because a bunch of men have to come together. What makes a revolution is a bunch of men coming together and saying, fuck that, we're not doing this anymore. Mm-hmm. We, as men, did create a situation where we allowed a government to try to empower women to enslave women plus men, so they could extract the life energy out of both. Because what they're really stealing when they inflate money is life energy. We push every day, work. I spent my 20s waking up at 4 in the morning. There's no telling how many times you've woken up at 4 in the morning to write books. And now the money that I make and the money that you make, regardless of how much money it is worth less due to inflation. And the system that is set up to divide men and women, where it used to be the woman would happily stay at home, respect her man that went to work, worked on his tools if he had to, or did whatever he had to do to make that situation work. They've now inflated the living costs through the roof, so now that they both have to go to work, and now the man and the woman have to compete against each other. And then when you take primal law into consideration, and she does get that bonus and he doesn't, there it is.
Yeah. And now you're inserted into another machine, which is the divorce machine, where they're going to make more money off of you, and it's in it's in attorneys, it's in the system's financial best interest to
Right.
drag that out and take as much money out of that process of separating those two people
Right.
as much as possible.
And-
So that then now you're also into another economy, the divorce economy on
Right,
top of that.
and that's big business. And so the point I'm trying to make is that events like Rebel Capitalist are really ways to get big groups of people together that believe and feel the same way about all the hours of hard work that they put in to not only make the money, but to preserve the money, particularly from a tax perspective, and to make the money grow. So that family and those children can have a future based off of what you did, because I think every man wants to leave a legacy. And events like this are a good way to educate yourself and to understand how the world is changing and what moves you can make on the chessboard, if you will, around how to make sure that that legacy is made and sustained for your children. And through doing that, I think that you can get the respect of a woman if you so decide to keep
That's
one
where you
around,
wanna
if
go.
that's where you want to go with it. And I think ultimately when it comes to, I'll never get married, but I think every man wants choice.
You heard it here.
Yeah, fuck it. It's not new information.
Yeah, that's funny. We should bring that up because that was a topic of discussion at my workshop
Right.
here. Was what's going to happen to marriage? We keep talking about
Marriage's done, bro.
What about polyamory? What about this? What about alternative relationship styles? What about
I'm never doing poly either.
Shouldn't a
You bet your ass I'm not doing poly.
Shouldn't a powerful man be able? Like we hear it on Fresh and Fit all the time. Like shouldn't a powerful man be able to cheat? Shouldn't he? Because he's a high value guy, so that's his prerogative kind of thing. The reason we're having that conversation right now is because guys are like, I don't want to get married. It's an all downside risk for men at this stage.
Right.
It is, and I'm quoting somebody and I don't remember who, so forgive me, but it's, marriage today, as we do it today, for men is like building a house on land that you will never own.
Right.
And so when I'm at a convention like this, or I'm having a discussion like this, people want solutions. They say, well, I really want to get married. I really want to have kids. I really want to have, a woman who's in love with me, and we can build a life together, and we can grow together, and that's has been the bedrock of Western civilization for the longest time is the family. Right. However you imagine that, but it's the family that has, coming together, forming families. What really is PUA? What really is intersexual dynamics from the game perspective? It's how do you get from single and sexless to getting with a girlfriend? And then ultimately, that's the proximate cause. What about the ultimate cause, which eventually you're hoping that you're going to solve your reproductive problem. You're going to put that family together and you're going to grow, and then that family will have other families as well. Exponentially, that's the idea or the reason. However, at every step along the way, there's something that's coming in between that's dividing men and women, whether it's an ideology, whether it's the mechanics of it, whether it's the legal aspects of it, whether it's I don't want to get married because I don't want to lose half my stuff. That right there, just even thinking about like losing half of your assets as a result,
Right.
or being with, like you were just saying a minute ago about the guys that are on that are having their wages garnished.
Right.
I don't want to have my wages garnished.
Right.
Those are economic decisions. Those are money decisions. It's going to affect your life. What is it? One of my quotes was the most important decision you're going to make as a man, really, or as a woman, is the person that you end up marrying or you have a child with, for sure. Right. Because now it's not. We've gone from from a marriage-based model of raising children to a child support-based model of raising children.
Right.
And that's happened only since the sexual revolution. So now we think about who's going to pay, the well-being and the welfare of that child is better off in the wife's or the mother's custody, and it's better that the guy is going to make more money. It's his duty to do
until it's time to go to the workplace.
Where did we come up with that? Why aren't we asking questions about that?
Which is a direct contradiction of the first statement. And that's why I think it's very clear to see that they are more profitable if they drive the two sexes apart, because then they're getting the life energy of each sex individually by putting them against one another, which is not much different from what I feel like they do with things like Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
or doing things against, Republicans against Democrats.
Any way to divide.
Any way to divide. Mm-hmm. Because again, if we're calling a revolution a bunch of men coming together strong in person, mm-hmm. on the same wavelength, the best way to dilute that is division.
And weaken the men.
Yes.
Especially. I think it was in the book Alpha God by Dr. Hector Garcia. I saw this. There was an example he gave about how when the European powers at the time, like France and Spain and everything, were colonizing places like South America, yeah. and such. What they would do is they would send the conquistadors over there, and then the Catholic Church would go over there, and their first order of business was to effeminate or feminize the men of those cultures, because that was the way to weaken that culture, to in some cases ridicule them or literally emasculate them, because the weak men can't fight back, and all that's left is women.
You're exactly right, and wouldn't you say that putting a man in a situation where he's been stripped of his ability to provide for his family, mm-hmm. through inflation,
take away his purpose,
or take his purpose, mm-hmm. away, or take his heart away from him, which is generally his family, mm-hmm. that's about as emasculating of an event that you could have happen, because that now he feels, mm-hmm. like he's not good enough,
yep.
and he can't supply, mm-hmm. for probably the thing in this world that he loves the most.
Right, and that's taken away from him either culturally or legally, or he never arrives at it in the first place if it's headed off at the past kind of thing. And I would argue that when we look at male suicide rates, which are between 3.5 to 5, depending on whose numbers you, 3.5 to 5 times the rate of women's right now. The first thing any article says is, well, we need to really reach out to men, and they need to be, it's this toxic masculinity, and they need to be more vulnerable, and they need to go to therapy, and they need to blah, 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 blah.
It's a fucking pipe dream.
What we need to start doing is understanding that purpose from that man has been removed from him. He has been zeroed out. I don't know how many times I have to keep saying this. It's not about how, he doesn't talk to his friends like these women do at Starbucks, right? It's not that communication factor. You have removed his purpose.
Right.
Of course, if he has built up this whole entire life, and he's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got a job, and you take all of that away from him, yeah, he's probably going to get suicidal as a result of that, because that was what he put his life effort, his life energy, into achieving, and then when that's gone, it seems like it's all for nothing.
And guess where he is right there? And this is probably the last point, and we can wrap this up, because when a man gets there, he's alone. Mm-hmm. You've isolated him all the way down to the granular senses that he is there by himself in that place, mm-hmm. and he's alone. And that's why events like Rebel Capitalists, mm-hmm. are so fucking important. Mm-hmm. Just to come around other people and have a brotherhood. Rebel Capitalists, the War Room, mm-hmm. the Manosphere, the events that you and I might put together later, mm-hmm. At Rebel Capitalist, being around other men and not feeling alone could be the one thing that saves your life and allows you to turn it around. And I think George deserves a great deal of credit for not only how he put on the event, who he put in the room, and the kind of energy and the souls that he brought together, mm-hmm. to make it happen. It's been world class, and I have to say, mm-hmm. I'll continue to come to these events.
Yeah, I think George so too. And I also want to say that there is an active effort to isolate men today, to keep you, to keep guys hikikomori, right? To keep you in your hotel room, to keep you in your keep you isolated and not talking with other people, not expressing ideas, because if they can isolate you, they can control you.
That's right.
And the fact that we can actually do this is threatening to that, and I think that you will probably see at some point along the way, because I've seen this happen before, where people will do an active push against something like this, because whenever men try to organize, whenever men actually just come together in a quote unquote male space, then suddenly it becomes toxic. Then it becomes, these are the old boys club. Then it becomes patriarchy. Then it becomes whatever, and name put the term to it that you want to put on it. But what it is it's a threat, because men are coming together and they're even just discussing the ideas. Not saying, hey, we're going to form an army. No, we're just going to get together and we're going to talk about these things. And then we're going to sort of come to a conclusion, or, a consortium of guys, an aggregate of information. Here's what I'm thinking about. I come from a background where we used to do that on the forums. Like I used to be a moderator at a forum called So Suave, which was part of the seduction community, but it developed into, here's what's going on, here's what I'm going through in Japan, in India, in America, in Germany, and wherever. And guys from all over the world got together and they started comparing notes. We did it about girls. Why cannot we do it about, how can we come together as guys and have a fraternity, I guess, is probably the best way to talk about it. And that's real difficult for guys to do, because we're very hierarchical. We're very station and status oriented. And so even just having that conversation is in some ways, I think, threatening to the people who would rather keep you as isolated as possible. And again, it's almost this like war on men, or because it's not them pulling the trigger, but it's you putting the trigger to your head as well, because it's nihilism and despondency.
Or the war that you never have to fight.
You don't have to fight it. Yes, exactly. And I think this is a really, like, the rebel capitalist is a very, it's broader, I think, than most people would get from the name or from the people who are going to be talking here. It's not just about libertarians. It's not just about, I want to learn how to, flip houses, or evade taxes or something like that. It's so much more than that. And I think it's sort of evolving a little bit more now, because I could not walk through this hotel without having, you guys saw this, without having 10 people, drag me over to want to, shake my hand or sign a book or something like that. I had no idea there was this kind of crossover between, my sphere and George Gammon's sphere. And so, to his credit, I think this is something that you should probably consider coming to in the future. I'm going to be actively promoting Rebel Capitalist a whole lot more in the future. And then I also have plans to do more workshops, more formal workshops. I did one this weekend as sort of a proof of concept, just to see if it, trot out the idea and see who would show up. And a lot of people were very, very positive about it. And I think that this convention is something that can lend itself to that kind of workshop. So I plan on doing more in the future.
So guys, look at the calendar, see when the next event is. Get out here, get out to any event that George is doing. It's definitely worth it. Rebel Capitalist is one of the best things that you could put your money into in 2022. There's absolutely no doubt. The world's changing, and they're covering everything it's changing under. And until next time we do it, bro.
This is a new level.
Yeah.
This isn't just, it's not just manosphere stuff. It's not just red pill stuff. It's not just, what's the latest scandal on YouTube kind of thing. Who's your favorite influencer on Instagram? This is like, it's operating at a different level, I think. And I'm happy and I'm glad to be a part of this right now, because it's not just about your YouTube channel now.
It's big boy stuff.
It's greater than that, and I wouldn't feel so I guess enthusiastic or emphatic about it if I didn't think that this was something that is relatable to what you and I already talk about in our own kind of our own special interests.
Yeah.
So, Rebel Capitalist Live. This is January, what is today? Today's the 9th, January 9th, 2022. And we will definitely be back at the next one for sure. So also, I want to just thank George Gammon for doing this. Thanks for having us out here for this. Also, Robert Kiyosaki, who gave us a great, I don't even call it an interview. We were just kind of sitting there just talking with the guy. It was awesome. And Ron Paul was here, and all the other speakers, everybody I met here and just sort of interacted with. Thank you for coming. Ken McElroy.
Yep.
If you attended my workshop, thanks for coming. Please, if it meant something to you, I'm not asking for a donation. All I'm asking for you to do is go tell George Gammon how much you loved it. That's all I'm asking. So thanks for watching us, and we will see you at the next one of these at Rebel Capitalist.